Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Viz. This month we have a Christmas special diving into all the amazing Iron Viz entries. And today we have Elisa here to share a little bit on her Chappell Roan Viz. So over to you, Elisa, to give a short intro about yourself.
Hi, my name is Elisa Davis. I've been a Tableau ambassador for I'm in my third year in the program. Love what you can do with Tableau, and I particularly love the data fam because we get to geek out on our niche interests and really go crazy with design and storytelling in a way that we don't get to in our day-to-day work.
So, talking about your Viz Chaperone, how did that idea came about? Because entertainment is such a wide topic.
Oh my God. So this was actually my third Viz idea. We got the heads up of what the topic was going to be a little bit before the month, which I really appreciated this year because I feel like brainstorming, deciding to do it and then committing to the topic are the first three steps of Iron Viz participation. So the first idea that I had would have been working with both the Data Plus TV and the Data Plus Movies data set. Dazed and Confused has a whole bunch of people who are about to be famous. Scott Pilgrim versus the World has a whole bunch of people who are about to be famous. It's got Anna Kendrick. It's got Macaulay Culkin's brother. It's got freaking Thor. So my theory was that if you looked at people who currently have made it to stardom, and how do we define stardom would be one analytical question. There were a lot of analytical questions, but then I went and looked at getting the data back out of the hyper files, and I was like, oh my God, I am not a dev.
It's a challenge.
Then I was like, oh, maybe I'm not going to do Iron Viz this year.
But that's a great idea. So let it brew in the back. Yeah.
I would love to build that Viz. If somebody wants to do a ride along with me, I'm very open to a collab on that side. The next idea that I had was related to one of the main ways that I entertain myself is through my sewing hobby. I got into it making Halloween costumes for my kid when he was little. And then he hit the age where like all you can find for boys is like trains and dogs and superheroes, and all you can find for girls is ruffles. And he loved like cats and pink. So I made him boy styled clothes, but in the colors and the patterns that he loved. And so that was super fun. He's in first grade now and he's starting to get a little too cool for all that creativity, but that's pretty fun. So that is entertainment for me. But then I was like, is a hobby entertainment? I don't know. I feel like the definition of entertainment is it's a thing that has an audience. And keeping myself entertained is great, but I felt like it was outside the spirit of the topic. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the movies one. I'm not going to do the sewing one. Maybe I'll just pass this year. And then I found out that the funding for my contract was going to be ending in a week. And I was like, well, shit.
Wow, okay. That's
Back to the drawing board. I am definitely doing Iron Viz this year because there's nothing like leaning into your favorite skill set and putting yourself out there to say like, hey, here's who I am, here's what I can do. By the way, I'm available to do more of it on a full-time professional basis, like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And about at that same time, Chappell Roan had been popping up on my socials, and I love that there is a new era in music being made by lesbians, that it's breaking out. The only people singing about kissing girls when I was in college was like Katy Perry, and to my knowledge, she's straight, right? So it's just like, oh, hey, look what I can do to attract the male gaze, right? I was just so excited and proud to be like, look, she's here, she's queer, and she's throwing a party. This feels new, right? She also talks a lot in her interviews and in her literature about like embracing your inner child and like making the music that she would have wanted to have available for her younger self to listen to. So once I decided that I wanted to do Chappell, I instantly had the core question: is this groundbreaking? Is she the first kind of party lesbian? And then from the design side, I'm 100% doing a bulletin board because I almost have to have things visually.
All right. Maybe we can walk through your wireframe because I know you had some sketches that you were doing.
So yeah, the first thing that I made was this corkboard background and the Hot to Go label. Because if you haven't heard the song, Hot to Go has got a cheerleader, varsity inspired vibe. You could absolutely imagine being at a band concert with the stands at the football game, and you're like,
The new version of YMCA, if you will.
exactly. So then I did a deep dive all the way to the bottom of the internet. And what I came up with solidified into this ridiculously elaborate wireframe. I still have them sitting right here. But I was like, okay, we've got to introduce her. She was an overnight sensation. People are calling her the next Madonna. She was on the cover of Rolling Stone this year, which is like awesome and crazy. And I had this concept that I ultimately axed of how all of these different artists have reached out to her to offer support and advice and feedback of this sudden rise to fame that she's experienced over the summer, which has come with a lot of fans being up in her business in a way that she's gotten pushback for not appreciating. So I was just going to show that not only has she risen in terms of her songs on the Hot 100 chart, but that she's also got all of these people in her phone who are ridiculously professionally successful. It was going to look like an iPhone. You're going to hover over the contact list, but that did not make it into the final product. And so I organized it like if you're going back to school, we're telling a story. So my questions were: who is Chappell Roan? How did she get where she is today? This is the section where we're actually looking at her music, and the data for this was going to be the Spotify API data, looking at her original release versus MP radar chart of the individual songs on her new thing. This was where I came up with this idea of comparing valence and danceability. I switched from danceability to energy when I got the actual data. But this is like, sad lesbian, angry lesbian, cheerful lesbian, party lesbian. There's different categorizations that would resonate with people. When I came up with this, I was mentally categorizing the artists that I had listened to in college and over the years. I had this other idea analytically to look at which types of artists seem to have cultural permission to sing explicitly. If you listen to Chappell's music, she is very clear about what she is interested in doing with her romantic interests. And I thought that was a little bit unique as well. You think about who's singing about that kind of stuff, and it's guys, right? Singing about their various conquests and prowess. And so you can have feelings either way about if that's appropriate to be doing. But it seemed in the past, women have permission to sing about love and men have permission to sing about sex. And I thought it was interesting that she was crossing that boundary, but I knew that this was going to be the heart of the analysis. And then the cultural context of why does all of this matter? Why am I stoked that there's a 26-year-old out there having professional success, throwing a party and having fun for serious reasons, right? So that's the wireframe. And that was actually the point at which I did a hard pause because I looked at it, the work that it would take to pull all of these different data sets together. And I was like, ugh, in a month, really? So I think having this, and if I get some data, I know that I can finish something.
This probably set a very strong skeleton for you plan your time. What are you gonna do in like the coming weeks?
Yeah, exactly.
This idea of having the board in board. How did you actually do that? Probably a lot of work just doing all of those.
That was so fun. I started in Photoshop, actually. I have been a design nerd longer than I have been a data nerd. I was the editor of my high school literary magazine, and we lay out this 80-page book of high school art and poetry. So design and me go way back. I used Adobe Firefly, which is their image generating AI engine, in Photoshop to generate the texture of the corkboard. Then I copied and pasted that and used a feature called image trace in Illustrator to vectorize it. You can see each of these is like a bajillion points, and each one of those individual things, I recolored it so that it was a little bit flatter in terms of color palette. So I was like, oh, how am I going to make this real? That it's a bulletin board, right? And I was like, ooh, with push pins. So I found a push pin, I vectorized it, I made all of these different variations. I made a couple of different colors. And that's also something that I did pretty early on, was define a color palette and load it into my Tableau preferences file. But from a design perspective, I knew that there's a lot of colors on this. In some ways, my design brief was I wanted it to look like handwritten. It's the same color as a pen. A lot of this is I'm imagining young me explaining something and writing it down with a pen. And then there was one where I was like, oh, on this page, I would have been doing this on graph paper using a pencil. So that's why I switched to this gray with the green background, kind of calling back to the late 90s, what my engineering dad would have had lying around if I wanted to like nerd out and make a scatter plot, right?
I played around with graph paper when I was young as well because there was this game called Digimon, Digital Monsters, and I drew lines to break it down in a much smaller piece so that I can actually draw some of the monsters that I captured and stuff.
That's awesome. So I think the best way to walk you through is I saved versions as I went, partially because I wanted to chat at a few friends who were also working on their own iron vizzes this year and be like, look, I made progress. And they would be like, woo, I made progress too. Sort of that like cheerleading. So I got tips from Lisa Trescott and her presentation at Tableau conference this spring, where she was like, do all the font stuff at the beginning, make a starter sheet, and then just copy that. So I did all the font stuff at the beginning. So you can already see here that I've made a choice to commit to Comic Sans, which I know isn't everyone's favorite font, and it's not usually mine, but of the web safe-ish ones, it was the closest to a handwriting vibe, and I was all in on the vibe for this, so I ran with it. And again, I'm imagining the big stuff I'm going to write on Post-its. I hacked in a little bit of a drop shadow by putting the corkboard in Miro and putting a Post-it on it and then screenshotting that. So if you look at this actual image asset, it's got a little bit of a drop shadow effect, but I feel like it really makes the 3D pop, right?
It's all the little details.
Right. So originally I had this bonus analytical question of like, I've got the location of her tours. Could I figure out if somebody had to drive the van from tour to tour, like how many times did the van driver drive around the whole entire earth while Chappell was becoming an overnight sensation? I was thinking of those little calendars that they used to give you on the front page of a bank checkbook back in the day. And there would have like little circles on dates that she had a show. But as I got into it, the date scaffolding was really giving me a headache. And this is also a concept that got cut. So you can see in this version, I've built out the color legend, this visual story of more and more of her songs showing up on the charts. I really liked this way of showing the analysis She didn't have the most #1 hits, but the one that I really felt told the story, sort of her growing share of mind in the popular realm, was this Song Weeks, which is like 1 point per song per week on the charts. Shows how like she was behind 3 names that everybody's gonna recognize at this point. And I had this fun little outlier investigation of, whoa, why did everybody drop? What's up with this triangle, right? And it was the week that Taylor Swift dropped Tortured Poets Department, and everybody
Of
else had
course.
screwed over to make space for Taylor Swift.
Of course.
Of course. But yeah, this saved me a whole ton of time. Until the very end, I had a blank corkboard. So every time I was ready to build out another section, I copied it off and I had all of my image assets already loaded in. So these push pins were in here the whole time, and I could just move them around and do whatever.
I love this process that you have because it makes it very easy for you to new pages and not import a whole lot of images and setting the sizes and everything. So I think this is probably a process that everyone should follow. I think we have a lot of things that the data fan community can learn from, especially just having a blank template for you to duplicate and build if you have a design heavy visualization. Thank you, Elisa, for running us through this amazing viz. If you guys haven't checked this out, do check this out. I can feel the passion from this. And the first time I saw this, I knew that board and board is something that you held really close to your heart, and it shows perfectly from this viz.
Oh, thank you. Maybe if you want to explore making a corkboard style viz, I've actually published a starter dashboard that has all of the design assets embedded. So you could download it, bring your own data, and play around with bringing your style without having to develop all of the image assets.
It's been really great talking on your viz, and I hope everyone learned something new from this. Hopefully, everyone will tune in for tomorrow's episode. See you, everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And one final shout out is Lisa Trescott. She and I were in a feedback session, which, if you're not familiar, Sarah Bartlett every year runs a free opportunity for anybody who's entering to sign up to get feedback on their Iron Viz submission at literally any stage of the process. A lot of people wait until fairly late. So I would encourage people to jump in earlier and get feedback on concept, wireframe, pairing the story with the data. But we were in a feedback session that wrapped early, and having this sort of, are you entering this year? I don't know. Are you entering this year? Probably not. And I was like, well, I've got a little bit and I'm really excited about it. So I showed her when it was literally like prior to the published version 0. And I was like, so I don't have a lot yet, but I've got like this corkboard and some push pins and all of that kind of thing. And she was like, this is so fun. So she's also excited about the throwback viz. She was, this makes me want to get out my Trapper Keeper. And I was like, I want to see what you do with it, right?
I think you touched a very important point over there because occasionally when people think about Iron Viz, it's a very solo thing, or that's what I used to think it is. But this year, I actually reached out to a couple more folks. I had a lot of brainstorming with Emily, Lauren, just a few, and they really helped me to ground my ideas and work through the chaos in my mind. I think that's really important because sometimes when you're so deep into your idea, you can't really make sense of it. So this year, I can safely say that I didn't feel alone at all. It felt like a community project, honestly. And I'm so proud of what I've done because it feels like everyone has been on the journey with me. And particularly true for me because I did a viz on my personal journey. There was a lot of emotional baggage that I was bringing in with.
Yeah, you were really close to it.
Yeah, and with all this support, it really made me feel that this topic was a lot more approachable because this idea honestly has been at the back of my mind for the longest time. I just didn't have the courage or the drive to just push through with it.